Imagine two cigars resting side by side. They are the same shape, the same length. They were rolled in the same factory, by the same hands, from tobacco grown on the same island. And yet, the moment you light them, they taste like they came from two entirely different worlds. One is bright and grassy and sharp. The other is dark and sweet and deep, with a richness that seems to coat the whole experience. The only obvious difference between them is the color of the outer leaf. One is the shade of light honey, the other is almost black. And that single difference, that one dark leaf on the outside, has a name that you have seen 1,000 times without ever really knowing what it means. Maduro. It is printed on boxes in every cigar shop on earth. It is spoken in every lounge, by beginners and by experts. People reach for it, they pay for it, they build entire preferences around it. And almost none of them can tell you what it actually is. Ask 10 smokers what Maduro means, and you will hear 10 different answers. Some will tell you it is a type of tobacco. Some will tell you it is a plant that grows dark. Some will tell you with complete confidence that it is the strongest cigar you can smoke. And nearly all of them will be wrong. Because Maduro is not a plant. It is not a species of tobacco. It is not a color that grows on a leaf out in the field. Maduro is something that is done to the leaf. It is a transformation. And to understand it, you have to follow a single tobacco leaf on a journey that begins long before anyone ever thinks about rolling it into a cigar. The word itself is your first clue. Maduro is simply the Spanish word for ripe, for mature. And that word was chosen for a reason, because this is a story about a leaf being brought to maturity on purpose, slowly, deliberately, and with an enormous amount of patience. Let us start where every cigar starts, in the field. Tobacco grows tall, its broad green leaves stacked up the stalk like rungs on a ladder. Those leaves are picked, and then they are cured, which is a gentle drying that turns them from green to brown, the way a leaf changes in autumn. At this point, every leaf, no matter what cigar it is destined for, looks more or less the same. There is no dark Maduro leaf hanging in the field. There is no light leaf and dark leaf growing on separate plants. The darkness has not happened yet. The darkness is still waiting. What happens next is the single most important process in the entire cigar world, and it is the process that almost no one ever sees. The leaves are gathered, moistened, and stacked into enormous piles. In the cigar world, these piles have a name. They are called pilones. Picture a great mound of tobacco, sometimes as tall as a person, packed together in the warm air of a warehouse. And then something remarkable begins to happen inside that pile. It begins to heat up, on its own, from within. This is fermentation. It is the beating heart of tobacco, and it is where a cigar's character is truly born. Inside that pile, the natural compounds in the leaf begin to react. Moisture, warmth, and the tobacco's own chemistry combine, and the pile starts to generate heat, like a compost heap quietly warming in a garden. The temperature climbs, deeper and deeper into the stack, until it becomes hot enough that it has to be watched with real care. And here is where the human being enters the story, because a fermentation pile cannot be left alone.
If it gets too hot, it can damage the very tobacco it is supposed to improve. So an experienced worker pushes a long thermometer into the heart of the pile and reads its temperature, the way a doctor reads a fever. When the heat climbs too high, the entire pile must be taken apart, leaf by leaf, and rebuilt from the inside out so that the heat escapes and every single leaf is exposed to the process evenly. This is called rotating the pilon, and it may happen again and again and again over many weeks. Now, this is the process that every good tobacco goes through, but this is also where the story of Maduro truly begins, because a Maduro wrapper is not made by a different plant or a secret ingredient. A Maduro wrapper is simply a leaf that is put through this fermentation for longer and hotter and with far more intention than an ordinary leaf. Where a lighter wrapper might be fermented for a certain amount of time and then set aside, the Maduro leaf is asked to stay in the fire. It is fermented again and again for extra weeks, sometimes for extra months. It is pushed gently but relentlessly deeper into maturity. And as it stays in that heat, the leaf changes. This is the moment everything turns. Deep inside the leaf, its natural sugars begin to react. They caramelize, they brown. If that word sounds familiar, it should, because this is the same family of chemistry that happens when bread bakes into a golden crust, when coffee beans roast from green to deep brown, when meat sears on a grill and turns rich and savory on the outside. It is the chemistry of cooking, and in a very real sense, that is exactly what is happening. That tobacco leaf, buried in the warmth of the pile, is slowly, patiently being cooked by its own heat.
If you could stand inside that warehouse while it happens, you would understand it with more than your eyes. The air is thick and warm and heavy with moisture. There is a smell rising off the piles that is unmistakable, a deep, sweet, almost intoxicating aroma of tobacco slowly transforming, part earth, part spice, part something close to baking. The leaves at the heart of the pile are warm to the touch, alive with their own quiet heat, and nothing about it looks like a factory. There are no machines humming, no conveyor belts, no gleaming steel. There is only tobacco and warmth and time, and a handful of people moving among the piles, reading them, tending them, the way a baker tends bread that must not be disturbed too soon. That reaction does two things at once. First, it darkens the leaf. The longer and hotter the fermentation, the deeper the color goes, from brown toward a rich chocolate, and finally toward that famous near black. And second, and this is the part that truly matters, it changes the flavor. Those caramelizing sugars create sweetness, a depth of flavor, notes of chocolate, of coffee, of dark earth and dried fruit, flavors that simply were not there in the raw leaf. At the same time, the extended fermentation drives off the harsh, sharp compounds that make young tobacco taste green and bitter. The rough edges are burned away. What is left behind is smooth and sweet and deep. So when you look at that dark, oily, almost black wrapper, you are not looking at a different kind of tobacco. You are looking at time. You are looking at heat. You are looking at a leaf that was deliberately brought to the edge of maturity and held there until it became something richer than it ever could have been on its own. Which brings us to the myth.
The great, stubborn, everywhere myth that surrounds this dark leaf. Because if you ask most people why they reach for a Maduro or why they avoid one, the answer is almost always the same. They believe that dark means strong. They look at that near black wrapper and they assume it must be powerful, intense, a cigar that will knock them flat. And this belief is so common, so widely repeated, that it has become one of the most trusted pieces of wisdom in the entire hobby. And it is almost completely wrong. Here is the truth. The strength of a cigar, that punch of power, comes overwhelmingly from the nicotine in the tobacco. And that strength lives mostly in the leaves hidden inside the cigar, the filler and the binder, the leaves you never see. The wrapper, that dark leaf on the outside that gets all the attention and all the blame, is only a small fraction of the tobacco in your hand. It contributes an enormous amount of the flavor, but it contributes relatively little of the strength. So the color of that wrapper is telling you almost nothing about how strong the cigar will be. A jet black Maduro can be smooth and mellow and gentle, and a pale light brown cigar can be so powerful it makes your head spin. The darkness is a signature of sweetness and flavor. It is not a warning of strength. Once you understand that, you have crossed a line that most smokers never cross. You are no longer reading a cigar by its cover. You are reading it by what is actually inside. Now think back to the person standing over that fermentation pile, thermometer in hand, deciding when to turn it, deciding when the leaf is finally ready. That decision cannot be made by a machine. It is made by experience, by touch, by smell. By years of watching thousands of leaves pass through the heat and learning to feel the exact moment a wrapper has reached its peak. To take it too early is to leave the sweetness undeveloped. To push it too far is to ruin it. Somewhere between those two mistakes lies a perfect leaf, and only a human hand, guided by memory, can find it. There is one more piece of hidden work that almost no one ever thinks about. When those dark wrappers finally emerge from the fermentation, they do not all come out exactly the same. Nature is never perfectly even. So the leaves are sorted, by hand, by eye,
into shade after shade after shade, dozens of subtle gradations of brown and black, so that when a box of cigars is finally filled, every single one matches its neighbor. A leaf that is beautiful but just slightly too light is set aside or sent back to the heat for longer. This is why a box of good Maduros looks so uniform, so deliberate, as though each cigar were a copy of the last. That uniformity is not an accident. It is the result of someone standing at a table, holding leaves up to the light, making a decision about each one, over and over, all day long. And that is really what Maduro is. It is patience made visible. Every one of those extra weeks in the pile is a week that the tobacco cannot be sold. It is cost. It is risk. It is a producer choosing, deliberately, to wait, when waiting is the expensive and difficult thing to do. That choice, to slow down, to let time and heat do their quiet work, is the entire soul of this dark leaf. Nothing about a great Maduro can be rushed. The moment you try to rush it, you lose the very thing that made it worth making. This is the same truth that runs through so much of what human beings treasure.
It is why wine is aged in a cellar instead of drunk the day it is made. It is why coffee is roasted instead of chewed raw. It is why a ham is cured for months, and why the finest things on a table are so often the ones that someone was willing to wait for. Time and a little controlled stress turning something raw into something refined. A Maduro cigar is a small, beautiful example of that same idea, rolled into a form you can hold in your hand. So the next time you see that word on a box, Maduro, you will know that it is not describing a plant. It is describing a journey. A leaf picked green, cured brown, and then buried in the warmth of a pile and slowly, patiently cooked by its own heat, month after month, until its sugars turned sweet and its color turned dark, and every harsh edge was smoothed away. You will know that the darkness in your hand is not a measure of strength, it is a measure of time. And when you finally light it, and that first wave of sweetness rolls across your palate, deep and rich and impossibly smooth, you will understand something that most people holding the very same cigar will never realize, that the flavor you are tasting was not created in the rolling room. It was created long before, in the quiet heat of a pile of leaves, by someone patient enough to wait for it. The most important part of that cigar happened before it ever became a cigar at all, and now, at last, you can taste the difference.